Hey, what's up everybody? Rob here from Ram Studio Comics. So in today's video, I'll be inking this artwork of Sabretooth inside of Clip Studio Paint and talking a little bit about that process. So with this one, this was drawn inside of Clip Studio with the pencil tool. So not much in the way of, or not really any custom brushes on this particular piece. Sometimes I'll use them, sometimes I won't. This particular one, I just really wanted to try to come as close to the original pencils because I was already pretty happy with the way it looked. Sometimes I will experiment further with the inks, and I suggest you do that. And you probably heard me talk about it in other videos. Like sometimes you're going to want to really stay tight to the pencils if they're clear. Other times you're going to want to really, expound upon them or make something more visibly discernible from what's there. So it really just depends upon the art style you're working over. I think in all situations you should try to implement your own, style into that. But in this case, I'm the pencil artist and the inker, so it, obviously it's going to make a little bit more sense that I stay to what's already there. But yeah, so one of the things I want to talk about today is the fact that I've lately felt like I've struggled to find my rhythm in some of this stuff. Okay, so I don't know if I want to chalk this up to art block. One of the things that's kind of led to it is that I'm constantly adjusting settings inside these digital softwares. And a big part of getting your inks right, your pencils right, all this stuff is getting your settings right. And then sometimes leaving them alone. But other times you have updates on these programs, which changes everything. So it's kind of annoying, but it's just kind of the nature of the beast. But what you have to do is just figure out a way to keep your comfort zone in these settings, because one of the things that I've noticed by working on multiple devices and coming back to Clip Studio, I've been kind of away from this program a little bit. I mean, I still use it day to day, but not for the predominant amount of my work. But then I felt like I needed to get back to it. I needed to work on my larger screen, and so I had to kind of readjust my settings. Now, the main things are going to be your Wacom device, if you're using a Wacom, your tablet settings. The brushes also have a pressure curve, things like that. So it's getting that feeling just right. And there's other variables too. There's the screen protector, there's the nibs and the pens you're using. Some pens have nibs, some don't. So there's a few different variables. But the main thing is that you really get it to where you just, when you go to put down a line, you get exactly what you're looking for. And then that combined with just repetition of using the same device. So a big question on the channel here is always, should I get this device? What device should I get? Is this the right one? And it's so hard for me to answer that for people because there's so many variables that coincides with also the device you're using. And then I just don't know the people. The people, we all create differently. It's not like we're in a classroom and I can look over your shoulder and see how you tense up when you draw or how you clench to your screen. Are you like right on top of it, or you sit back and draw like a painter? Or paint like a painter, but you're throwing your arms around. So there's all these different ways that people create, and you just can't, over the internet, you just can't deduce those things, deduct those things. I don't know how you say it, deduce. So you make guesses, you make assumptions, but what you have to think about is, does it feel comfortable? And then if it doesn't feel, very natural in the beginning, how much time can you dedicate to it before you get frustrated? Because I can guarantee you this, if you don't get frustrated or you allow yourself to move past frustration and keep working, you're eventually going to get it with any tablet. And the reason why I say that is because I've seen people do amazing work on the regular Intuos tablets, which would be considered probably the most basic of devices out there, and everything in between from that to the Cintiqs, iPad Pros. It's not about the device, but it is about getting the feeling of the brushes just right. Now in this part, I'm doing all the fills to the characters, so this isn't a big deal. Like the fills are just fills. Now it is a lot quicker in this software because you can simply use your fill bucket and just make sure your edges are closed when you draw around it. And then you also want to make sure that your brush has anti-aliasing or anti-aliasing, I never know how to say it, either turned off or turned to a more solid edge. That and or use your selection tool, your magic wand, or not your magic wand, but your lasso, forgive me. So yeah, but then once I get to this part, I start doing a little bit more rendering, and this is probably where, or this is definitely where getting the settings right is even more important. So for me to get the, the thin pointed lines that I like to use throughout things like the facial hair, the cross hatching, even the line weight around the face and things like that, but it's more or less all this tiny rendering that I'll do. If I don't have my brush setting right, I'll really fight every line that I put down at the stage, and that's just no fun, right? And then what it does, it takes you out of the piece, it takes you out of wanting to create because you're struggling so badly with trying to create the lines that you want. Now, again, if you're not to the level where you're just not getting the lines that you want regardless, no matter what you use, then that does mean you just have to stick it out with whatever you're using. I do feel like things like Clip Studio Paint and Procreate are probably the two best for inking, the most natural for me, but that could be a biased opinion because I've spent the most time with them. So again, that's where I can't really help you make that decision. All I can say is the longer you do it, the longer you stick with it, the better it's going to get. I need to find one of my older pieces. I started inking inside of Adobe Illustrator years ago now. I guess it would be 6 or 7 years ago. It was probably my first digital inks. And it was horrid. In fact, I don't have any of those pieces online anymore. I've went through and deleted them. Like one of the things I do is update my portfolio, and I delete old pieces that just look like they suck these days. So, I'm sure all those are gone, but I need to dig one up and show you, because one of the things that I could see dramatically from then to now is the fact that my inks when I was using Illustrator were very blocky, very, very, you could see me struggling to bring the lines together. And so these lines on the brow, you could see I'm not struggling at all to taper those and have them in tighter succession and then fade those off. That's just one of the gradients that I like to create. And I don't add that all over the character. I do a lot of little variations. I like to render different materials different ways so that they all look like, different materials. And I'm not the most advanced inker. I mean, there's definitely inkers that just, go crazy with this stuff, and they really paint a picture. They really make the characters read just extremely well, all the surfaces independently, and some techniques that are very much like a, maybe like a tight cross hatching over the whole thing. They don't worry about rendering different surfaces different ways. So I guess it's just opinion, it's just style choices, but I like to try to vary it up a bit. I like to have the lines tighter in succession. If I'm trying to create a tight gradient, it means that I'm going to bring that black shadow to where you don't see the edge so much. So if you space the lines out, then you're going to very much see that line edge that you're trying to break up into a gradient. But if you taper those lines and you bring them tighter in succession to that thicker end of the tapered lines that you're creating, then it's going to soften the edge of that shadow. And that seems to be the thing that most young artists will ask me, and they seem to struggle with the most. Like for one, they'll say they can't get line clarity, or they don't know where to apply the shadows, the gradients. And that's really probably the simplest way I can put it, as far as thick to thin lines. But the more you want to soften up that line edge of whatever you're putting the gradient towards or against, you're going to use those thicker lines in tighter succession and then blend those off to thinner lines. There's plenty of other ways to accomplish your cross-hatching and shading and stippling, all sorts of stuff. But that's probably the thing that's really worth practicing, because once you get good at doing that, I think that it shows you got a little bit more hand control. Then you're going to play around with things like different ways that you angle the lines, ways where you don't bring the line all the way to the shadow and maybe you space it out. And then just think about your cross-hatching or your line making as patterns. You're trying to create unique patterns. And if the pattern doesn't look good to you, check it from a distance, turn your blue line art off, then get it out of there. Oh, and just because I know somebody's going to ask, when you take your pencil layer, if you notice on the right of the screen, there's a little blue and white boxes. That's your layer property. You click that blue, and it will change your pencil layer to a blue line layer, and it'll put that little color box next to the layer. It's on the bottom layer with the eyeball, or anyways. So somebody always asks, so I figured I'd throw that in there. But yeah, so think of these crosshatch effects as patterns. You're also going to vary up the the distance of that tapered line. You're going to have some that are shorter, some that are more elongated, and all of this is going to help you develop hand control and give you more tools in your toolbox, right? It's going to give you more designs, more effects that you can apply so that your work doesn't look like there's just too much of the same thing. But again, that's subjective, that's style choice. You might want a very consistent look over the whole thing. You might be looking at this and going, man, Rob, you're putting lines all over the place. It's kind of hard to read. It's fine. You got to pick what you like. What is your, it's like you're signing your work, okay? Each part that you apply to your work, it's a new signature. And inking is very much a signature over your work if you decide to be your own inker. If not, then you're signing your work by the way that you render out the pencils anyways. But I really feel like when I ink the work and incorporate another little bit of the line weight that I like to apply, the line effects, I feel like I'm signing my work the whole time. I feel like I'm doing one big signature over my work. But in this case, it's really just a recreation of what was there. I didn't, especially watching this video again, I could see I really didn't experiment and add a whole lot more. I think I should have probably went a bit further, but again, I was pretty happy with the pencils on this one, so I just wanted to recreate it, go over the top of it and really just clean up the lines themselves. And another technique you can try, or tip that you can try to implement, is taking some work that you really admire, some ink work that, by somebody that's more advanced than you, and convert it to a blue line and ink over top of it. Okay, so I really think that's kind of a great way to learn, because you're going to train your muscle memory. You're going to get your hand to recreate those lines that you're trying to make. So if you're really struggling to get clean lines, pick a inking style that's extremely clean, extremely precise. Again, convert it to a blue line, whether you work digitally or traditionally. There's ways to do that. Obviously, digitally, it's very easy. And then ink right over top of it. And I would say that, a lot of people probably frown upon that. Oh, it's tracing, it's like, whatever, it's going to help you get better. And then ultimately, segue from that to just drawing and copying your own version on a different sheet of paper just by looking at it. And then ultimately you put the reference away altogether and you just do your own thing. Whatever you do, as long as you're practicing, as long as you're making more art, you're going to get better. But there's certain things like that that can really unlock some doors. Like what I tend to do is I look at anything that resonates with me. So I look around, I look at the world around me, I look at inking that I admire. I look at artists that I admire. If I see an art piece that just says something to me, I mean, it's like just amazing in the way that they do the anatomy or their facial expressions or whatever, then I'm probably going to ink it. I'm going to take the time to ink it and redraw it or do something. And then that ultimately it's a great study. So I do that all the time. And I think that, again, if you're really struggling to the clarity that you want, it's going to take some time, but probably a great exercise is just to ink over work that's, that you admire. But yeah, so this has been a fun one. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'd like to know what you think about the art, but I'd also like to know, more importantly, what you want to see on the channel in the future so I can get that on the schedule. I'm always trying to create new content, and yeah, I've got so many videos now, I kind of wonder what to create next, and you guys always have some good ideas for me, so make sure to comment in the section below. And so once again, thank you very much for tuning in and watching this video. More content is on the way very soon. As always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and bye for now.